Hi, welcome to Null Zero Labs. Bit of a different video today. Not technically a lab tutorial, just me trying to figure out how to configure a Linux Debian box as a PPPoE server, and also installing iPerf3 the speed test software on there so that I could connect clients inside the virtual lab to the PPPoE server and perform speed tests. And then later I'm going to configure this exact same setup in real hardware so that I can test physical gateways connecting to the PPPoE gateway and perform a transmit and receive speed test over the PPP, and compare it with things like DHCP just to see what the speed differences are and what any kind of overhead there is when comparing the two ways of delivering an IP address to a gateway device. So in this video, I'm just going to concentrate on configuring the VM for EVE-NG just to make it work. It's not probably the best guide to follow, but it's just an experiment. It gets work. We managed to get it working and get a client connected, and we perform a speed test over it. So if you enjoy this type of thing, just give it a like and subscribe. So like I said, we've got a bit of a different one today. I'm just in the lab where I want to build a dedicated PPPoE server on a Linux image so that I can use it for testing PPPoE clients within the EVE environment lab. And then maybe at a future date, I'd like to replicate this PPPoE server on a Raspberry Pi, where in the real world, when I want to demonstrate a like a home gateway connecting via PPPoE, I can just fire up the Raspberry Pi, plug it in, and have the modem automatically connect to it. So I want to test that scenario within EVE first. So first of all, I need to create a PPPoE server. So I'm ls-l. So I'm on the EVE box. I need to create a directory under the quem folder. So mkdir linux, I'll just call it PPPoE server, Linux PPPoE server. Okay, so we're in there right now. We need a Debian image, which I do have downloaded. So we will copy that across. If I can find FileZilla. There we go. Going to connect to EVE. Yes. Okay, now I need the /upt. I want unit lab, add-ons, quem, and the folder we want is Linux PPPoE server. And then what I'm going to need is the Debian image, the ISO. So copy that over. We'll then rename that to cd-rom.iso. And we need to create a disk. So if we go to the EVE-NG website, Linux images, come down here. So we're going to want to create a disk image, vcal. So we need this command to create the hard drive. So we can do that in the terminal. Do that, create a disk. So now we should have a disk and a CD-ROM ISO. Double check that is finished. So let's just rename that to cd-rom.iso. So now we should have our two files inside this folder, cd-rom.iso and the blank hard drive. So next, once we've done that, we can now drag it onto our lab and we can boot it up. So we're going to need network access to the real internet. And we're going to need our Linux node, PPPoE, PPPoE server. I'll give it 4 CPU cores. It's going to have 2 Ethernets. That's an okay amount of RAM, I suppose. I think we'll stick with those networking choices. So ENS, so 3 would be E0. So we want that connected there. And now I should be able to start this up. Now what it should do is it should boot from the CD-ROM and we should start installing. There we go. Right, so let's continue our install. So we're going to want English and United Kingdom. I'm pretty sure it's an English keyboard, so yes. So we'll do all the base install and do an update to it so that it's up to date. And then we will double check what else we need to do to get Accel PPP. Looking to do the install for. Ethernet 3 is going to be our uplink in case we want to install stuff and if we want to NAT our clients to the internet. Root password, configure clock, detect disks, use the whole disk, don't need to do any fancy partitioning, use the entire disk, yes, all in one partition, finish, yes, right, the changes. Then we'll do the install and then we'll select just like the base install. So it'll just be the base operating system with SSH so that we can get into a CLI. And then we'll look through the steps to install Accel PPP. If I can find the link to their documentation that I was looking at again. There we go. Okay, so their main website isn't working, but the docs are working. Install on Debian. So we've got to install some requirements. We're going to build it from source code and then do the install. Okay, so we'll shift that over there so we can read it. Make our life easier. Okay, so do I wish to scan the media? No. Yes, we will use a mirror because it will be closer. We'll use the United Kingdom. Select the UK one. No, we do not wish to participate in a package survey. Here we go. So we don't want a desktop. We don't GNOME. We just want SSH and standard utilities. That should do for now. Click next. So we'll get this installed. I'll bring you back when we get to the CLI. Then we'll do the steps of doing any updates, check for any updates, make sure that's all there. And then we'll start with the steps of doing the downloading the source code and building. Okay, so our box has booted up, completed the install. So now we are going to log in as root. I'm going to do a apt update, nano slash etc slash apt source list. Let's comment that out. Apt update. All packages up to date, upgrade. That's all upgraded. Right, let's see. We've got a local address because trying to paste it in via that doesn't work. Yes, and access denied. Okay, so we will log in with the That should get us in. Then we should be able to SU. Now we're root. Perfect, that will do. So that gets us in. Cancel that. Right, so we're in. So it said we needed to install some dependencies. So we need these. So we can copy and paste these. So we need build essentials, CMake, we need the Linux headers, we need Git, and we need some other libraries. That looks like everything that we need. Okay, that version works. All right, so let's get all those dependencies installed. Then we're going to modify ENS4, which is the other interface of the box, so that it's in an up state when the system boots, but it's not going to have an IP address on there because we don't need it to have one for PPPoE clients to access it. So nano/etc/network. Need the interfaces file. So this is fine. ENS3 can be DHCP, that's fine. So now we want auto ENS4, which is the secondary interface. And now if I copy this section, so that should give us the interface and turn it up. So manual, set the device up. Okay, so Control X. And now if we do an IPADD, you can see ENS4 is down. So now if we system control restart networking, there we go. We can see ENS4 is now listed as up, but there's no IP address information on it. Good. Okay, so that solves that. Now let's download and build the PPPoE server. So we need to clone Git repository into the folder /opt. We'll do that. We are then going to make a directory, a build directory, and change into it. So we're going to make the directory. We're then going to change into that directory. So we're now in opt/Accel PPP code/build. We're now going to do what we want to build. So we'll copy the next part of the instructions. I'm just following the Debian install instructions on their docs website. Hopefully that should work. We're not Debian 10, we're Debian 13. So we will build that. So we then do make. And then we're then going to package it. Okay, so that passed. So we're going to package it into a deb. We're then going to install the package. Status ACC PPP service. Okay, it's not started, it's dead. So what we need to do now is put our config file in place. Okay, service is up and running at least. So it should be listening on there. /3-server, that's working. Okay, let's for a test. Let's stop that. Let's grab another Linux node. We need a desktop. And we need a, go with OpenSense 4096. Get 4 CPUs, 4 NICs. We'll connect outside interface to our PPPoE server, and we'll connect our inside interface to our Linux client. We'll start everything up. And we'll check that we can connect via PPPoE to the PPPoE server. And if we do, then we'll commit this image because we know that it's then working. Whether it's like the best PPPoE server, I wouldn't probably recommend using this in a production environment, but for a test bed, that is what we want to try and achieve, something that we can quickly drop in and then allow our PPPoE clients to connect to it, and we can perform a speed test directly to the PPPoE server rather than going through the PPPoE server. It will allow us to like test directly to it. OpenSense. And what we want now is their wizard. Can leave this all as default. Remind me later. The WAN interface is going to be PPPoE. The username was test1. The password was testpass1. We're going to worry about the PPPoE service name. Going to undo those because we're using private IP addresses. We'll click next. We'll leave the default password, apply. Now let's jump back onto here. Let's do an ACL AC command, and then it'll show sessions. Okay, nothing yet. Interfaces, overview, PPPoE. Doesn't look like that's coming up. No session. No, not file. I'm not going to use radius. I'm just going to use chat secrets. I'm not using that. I'm not using that. We are using PPPoE. I'm just using chat. Common, PPP, PPPoE. There's DNS4. Control, restart a. Check the status. Okay, that says it's running. Show sessions. Okay, we have a session. Good. Okay, so our Linux box should have a private IP address from the OpenSense server, and it should then have a connection to the gateway. The DNS is there, so we should have. Check if we have internet access. We do. Good. Okay. apt install 3. So we should ping 10.255.0.1. That should be the PPPoE gateway, which we can. Okay, so now if we was to do iPerf3, we are a client connecting to 10.255.0.1. And then if we start server, let's do a test. Okay, so we've got 2 gig from the client to the server. Again, that's because we are on a virtual environment, but at least that's working. Let's do a test. We want 4 parallel streams. I think that's a capital P. We want a timeout of say 30 seconds and we want the reverse. So this will test in both directions. Hitting 2.8 gigabits per second from the client through the OpenSense to PPPoE server. Obviously this is best case scenario. When we test it in with real hardware, we'll probably see a different result. So the sender was able to hit 2.8. If we look here, we'll see that we had a send of 2.8 and we received at 2.8. So we did 3 gigabit per second from the client to the PPPoE server. But that's obviously because of the interface types we're using. If we was to adjust these interfaces, we'll see that there is a difference. Let's change the interfaces on here. Let's change them to just standard E1000 interfaces. See what that does. See if it gives us a more realistic result. Right, that's better. I'm now getting the correct information reports for the interfaces. So let's double check again now. Let's bring up server on that. Let's do a test. 500, 600, 600. Right, okay, so that seems more realistic. So we have a working PPPoE server. So it's Debian 3, Debian 13. It's running Accel PPP. We're using PPPoE. We're terminating PPPoE sessions on ENS 4. We are natting traffic to the uplink interface of ENS 3. We're using local authentication. So we're using a text file for local authentication. We have an IP pool of 10.255.0.0/24. And it is starting as a service. So I think and we've also got a speed test daemon running on there so that we can speed test to it. So I think, even though that was a bit of a faff, I think we have a working PPPoE server that we can use in a lab for testing. So this is all virtual. And then what I will do is I'm going to build similar setup to this in real hardware using one of the Raspberry Pis, and we can then plug it into a switch and use it for testing. I have a couple of gateways that I would like to test using PPPoE to them, because what you got to understand is using PPPoE, there's a overhead with PPPoE. You've also got it's dependent as well on CPU and the number of cores that you've got, the type of throughput that you're going to get. You may have a custom box for PPPoE as acting as a home firewall, and you may be running something like OpenSense on it there or pfSense, and the CPU may be too old that it's not fully supporting the PPPoE traffic, and then you're not hitting the full bandwidth that you would be reaching. So we want to test to there. I'm going to do now is, now that we're happy with that, to commit it, let's go through the committing of it. So we're going to stop all of these other nodes and delete them because we're not going to need them. We're going to remove that CD-ROM. We're then going to find our pod ID. And then we're going to cd/opt/unitlab temp 0, paste our lab you did. There it is, our vcal file. So we are then going to want to commit that. So we're going to copy that command, commit. Once that's committed, we're going to change back and we're going to compress that image and make it smaller. So I'm going to pre-copy this. And now I'm going to cd/opt/unitlab add-ons quem. And I want Linux PPPoE server. I'm going to create a compressed image of it. And then once that's compressed, we're then going to replace the compressed one with the main one. And then we're going to delete the lab, drop it all in, check and make sure it works. And then we should have our working PPPoE server and speed test server in one box. And now that we know that works, we should then be able to then recreate it on some real hardware for when we want to test some PPPoE connections. So let's get this compressed file system made, and then we'll clean that up, and I'll come back when we have got it all in a lab. All right, so here we are now back with our first lab. So this is the first time turning it on. So PPPoE server, OpenSense server, and a desktop. So let's get them all started up. PPPoE server is booting. That's a good sign. It's reached its login prompt. So that should now be running as we expect. Our OpenSense server should now be booting up. It will boot up with its default configuration, and we should have our desktop replicating, having our PC connected to our home gateway connected to our ISP and PPPoE via PPPoE. So we should now be able to test from our desktop. And we should bring up the first time configuration wizard. Yes, we want our gateway. Our WAN connection is PPPoE. Our username was test1, test pass 1. Unticking these because we are running on a private network. We will apply that. We should see under our interfaces, our PPPoE interface come up. Yes, we do. It's got an address, 10.255.0.2, the first one of the bunch. The gateway is there, and it's got an IP address. So if we go to google.com, there we go. Our home client now has internet access. Let's check our terminal. We are the client connecting to 10.255.0.1. There we go. 1 gigabit per second. Speed test result. Give or take a little bit of overhead. Let's do /R. So one direction and then the other. Perfect. So doing both in the same time, we drop down to about 700. We do a gig in each direction, no problem. Perfect. So that is working. We have our working virtual PPPoE server running on Linux that we can use to terminate our PPPoE clients and then send them on to the internet for internet access, and we can also speed test directly to them. The next step is I'm going to build this similar configuration onto a Raspberry Pi, and then once I've ironed out all of the installation steps, I will write a guide for it and I'll put it onto the GitHub page so that we do have a step-by-step guide to follow in future if we ever want to recreate this box again. So I think that should be it for this video. It was just a brief one just to cover going through setting up this box and testing to see if it would work, and how I'd install a PPPoE server on Linux. I've never had to do that before. Normally I'd run a Linux, a Cisco, sorry, BNG or LAC or whatever you want to call it at the edge, and then we'd normally backhaul to an LNS, and then from the LNS onto the internet, or we'd configure some other kind of Cisco device there to act for that PPPo server, and then have a speed test server sitting behind it. But this was a good experiment just to see if we could build a Linux PPPoE server and terminate the sessions on there, and obviously then run a speed test directly to the box rather than through it. So at least this way we can see from the client via the PPPoE interface straight to the server the test result. So like I said, I'm going to test this in real hardware. I'll write up a follow-up for it and then I'll put that out so you can all see it. I'm flying out to Frankfurt this week, so hopefully I'll be able to capture some footage of that trip whilst I'm out there doing a Palo Alto firmware upgrade. But other than that, I'll see you next time. Have a good week, have a good day, and see if you have not already done so, please hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you soon.